Hello, welcome to the History Inquirer. Today's episode will be about Christopher Columbus and his first voyage to the New World. We will also look at the impact his first voyage had on the world that he inhabited back then and its legacy that still affects us today. The main questions that I will focus on answering are: Did Columbus discover America? Who was he? What were his motivations? First, a note on sources. The sources that I use are the Britannica Encyclopedia and the Four Voyages by Christopher Columbus from Penguin Classics. If you can see it. There you go. You can kind of see. Secondly, the flag behind me is the flag of Castile and Leon. This is the royal flag of the kings and queens of Spain from around this time and was one of the flags flown by Christopher Columbus on his voyages to the New World. Now, obviously, this is not the exact flag bought off of Amazon, but this is the royal flag of Castile and Leon, of the kings and queens of Spain at this time, so I thought it was appropriate. Now, before I get to Columbus, I do want to mention what else was going on in the world at the time. In 1453, 2 years after Columbus was born, the Ottoman Turks succeeded in capturing the city of Constantinople, now Istanbul, thus bringing the reign of the Byzantine or Eastern Roman Empire to an end. In England, the Wars of the Roses, the real-life Game of Thrones, were going on between the royal houses of Lancaster and York. They would end with the final battle of Bosworth being fought and won by Henry Tudor, who became King Henry VII of England in 1486. His son, the future King Henry VIII, would be born in 1491, 1 year before Columbus set sail. In Italy, the Italian Renaissance was in full swing. Leonardo da Vinci was born in 1452, 1 year after Columbus, and Michelangelo in 1474. They and other famous artists would be at their peak during and after the voyages of Columbus. For example, one of Michelangelo's early works, The Battle of the Centaurs, was completed in 1492, and his work on the Sistine Chapel was completed in 1512. He started in 1508. So a few years after Columbus had finished his fourth voyage, he started work on the Sistine Chapel and then completed it. Columbus's fourth voyage ended in 1504, for reference. Anyways, Christopher Columbus was born in 1451 in the Italian city-state of Genoa. Genoa was a thriving maritime and commercial center rivaled only by Venice. The Italian city-states conducted a lot of trade with the Levant, or Middle East, for silks, spices, dyes, etc. In this trade, they basically had a monopoly. If another European nation wanted spices, they had to go through the Italian city-states or the Ottoman Turks. Now, the Italian city-states are Christian, the Ottoman Turks are Muslim. And there's a lot of tension between Christians and Muslims. So, odds are they would go through the Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa. And, the problem is they had to pay it through the nose. So it is for this reason that explorers from Portugal started sailing around the coast of Africa to get to India. They wanted to cut out the middlemen and purchase spices directly from the source. Now, Portugal's main rival at the time was Spain, and they wanted to get in on the spice trade too. However, they were still engaged in their wars for the reconquest of Spain, the Reconquista, trying to drive out the Muslim invaders. In 1469, Prince Ferdinand of Aragon married Queen Isabella of Castile. The two would rule their kingdoms jointly starting in 1479, uniting them under one rule and one faith by completing the Reconquista with the conquest of Granada in 1492. Later that same year, Columbus would set sail. Christopher Columbus is described as handsome, intelligent, educated, charming, and well-spoken with brown hair. By the time that he started to pitch his proposal to find a western route to Asia, he was already a seasoned navigator and sailor. He had spent some time in Lisbon, Portugal, sailing for the Portuguese merchant marine, which is where he went first to try and get support for his western journey. However, King John II of Portugal refused, as did King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain, at least at first. One of the reasons they refused initially was due to the Spanish Reconquista, which was still going on. For the last 500 years, Spain was trying to reclaim its territory from the Muslim invaders, and in 1492, they succeeded. With this victory, they were now free to pursue other conquests, projects, aspirations, etc. They were also rivals of Portugal and wanted to get in on the spice trade for themselves. This made the proposal by Christopher Columbus more tempting because if they could get to India and Asia faster by going west, maybe set up an outpost or colony as well, perhaps several, they could then gain an advantage over the Portuguese and become rich. Columbus also had help from Luis de Santangel, the Spanish treasurer, and the Franciscan friars. Now, Queen Isabella, King Ferdinand, they were very religious and pious, so the Franciscan friars appealed to them. There was also a lot of pro-Christian and anti-Islamic fervor in Spain at the time. So all these factors kind of came together to contribute to the launch of the first voyage. Columbus and the Portuguese were also in communication with a cosmographer from Florence by the name of Toscanelli. He was another proponent of a shorter distance between Portugal and Japan. He was one of the first proponents for people to propose the idea of sailing west to reach the east. So Columbus was not the only one to think this. Also, Toscanelli believed that the distance from Portugal and Japan was 6,000 miles, whereas Columbus believed it to be less than 3,000. However, the actual distance is 12,000. So, yeah, Columbus was way off. And Toscanelli was off by half. However, one thing to keep in mind is they didn't have modern technology. They didn't have GPS or Google Maps or anything like that. So, another interesting fact is that 15 years before Columbus set sail, there was another expedition west by the Danes and one Portuguese pilot. They visited or revisited Labrador, and Columbus learned of this when he traveled to Iceland. However, he did not care about it because he wanted to find gold, spices, silks, resources, wealth, etc. He wanted somewhere with a warmer climate, resources and trading opportunities like Asia and India. Basically, he wanted to make a name for himself and become rich and famous. Okay. Also, back up with Toscanelli. Toscanelli also gave Columbus a map that he would use during his voyages. And the funny thing is, Columbus found land almost exactly where the map said it was. The only problem was that it was the wrong continent. Okay? So, with the backing of the Spanish crown, Columbus outfitted 3 ships for his first voyage: the Pinta, Nina, and the Santa Maria. These ships were caravels, which were small sailing ships that could be rigged with either square sails or lateen sails. Very important, lateen sails. Those are triangular sails that would enable a ship to sail windward or into the wind towards the direction that the wind was coming from. Caravels were fast and agile as well. And he set sail on August 3rd, 1492, headed for the Canary Islands, where they stayed for a month to repair the Pinta. It was having some issues with its rudder, not a problem you want to have when making a transatlantic journey. Now, on the way, they saw a whale and several birds, as well as some vegetation floating in the water. Finally, they made landfall on October 11th at Watling Island, also known as San Salvador, in the Bahamas. While there, they traded with the natives, giving them glass beads in exchange for spears, parrots, and cotton thread. Columbus described the people as being naked, having coarse hair, fine bodies, and being well built. Some had face and body paint. They traveled in canoes or longboats made from tree trunks. The natives are also seen as being kind of naive, at least at first. However, once they had learned about the value of different things, they were actually found to be very intelligent. So, yeah, they definitely learned quickly and were shrewd in their trade dealings. Now, Columbus did not stay long at San Salvador because he wanted to press on to find the island of Japan. Rather, he thought he was in Asia. Now, he and his men next came to what is now called Rum Cay, and then Crooked Island, where they traded with the natives at both locations. He described the islands as being very beautiful, green and full of trees. Next, on October 25th, they came to the Ragged Islands, which he named Las Islas de Arena because of the, and I quote, sandbanks that stretch southward from them for 6 leagues. End quote. Finally, they arrived at the island the natives called Colba, or Cuba. Here they met the chief or king of the island and shared a meal of sweet potatoes and corn. They also discovered tobacco and brought samples of the plants aboard their ships in exchange for pieces of leather. Before they left, they took 12 of the natives with them to bring to Castile so they could provide witness testimony of the lands and resources. Columbus says that they were taken peacefully. However, one wonders exactly how peacefully it was. He then sailed onto the island of Hispaniola and arrived there on December 6th and discovered the island of Tortuga, so called because it looked like a tortoise. As they went, they kept finding natives with pieces of gold jewelry and were wondering where the gold came from. Where is the gold? It was near Tortuga where they met the king of the island who befriended them, or one of the kings, I should say, and they exchanged gold for bells and other tags. On the way to the king's village, the Santa Maria ran aground. Columbus then decided to build a fort near the village from the wreckage called Navidad since it was around Christmas time. Actually, just after Christmas. Now, after stationing some men in the fort and loading his remaining ship, the Niña, the Pinta had left them earlier, he then sailed for Spain. Now, about the fort being there, the natives were okay with it because they were not the only tribe on the island, and so in face of rival tribes, having a nice fort there, back with their buddies, the new friends of Spaniards, that would give them some protection against other native tribes, as well as keep the channels open for trade. Anyways, on the way home, they encountered the Pinta near Monte Cristi, and when exploring on shore, became involved in a fight with the natives when they tried trading with them. After this, the ships departed for Spain, though they were separated by a storm. There was actually several storms that he had to deal with on his way home, and Columbus and Niña arrived in Lisbon, Portugal on March 5th, battered by the storms. And on March, where he had audience with King John II, and then on March 13th, 1493, was back in Spain. Now, when he reached Barcelona, where the king and queen were, he was given a hero's welcome and gave an account of everything that had happened. However, the king and queen were a little bit suspicious that he went to Portugal first, which, as I've said, was their rival. Nevertheless, he did receive a hero's welcome, given a parade and everything. So to conclude, did Christopher Columbus discover America? The answer is yes and no. This is because, while he was not the first European to set foot in the Americas, the Danes had been there first, the Vikings, okay, it was his voyages and discoveries that had led to further exploration, conquest, and colonization. Without his contributions, the various countries that now exist in the Americas would never have been founded. Also, about the natives, they were treated very well. The natives that he brought back to Spain with them, they were treated very well. They were given a feast. They were given clothes. They were given baths. They were baptized into the Catholic Church. So yeah, they were treated very well. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Where we're talking about part 2 of Columbus, the second, third, and fourth voyages.